Morning. This is the time and the place for the Butte County Planning Commission special study session. Please join me in Pledge of Allegiance. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would you please call a roll?
Commissioner Moran?
Present.
Commissioner Lehman?
Here.
Chair Wilson?
I'm here.
Commissioner Lambert?
Here.
And Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you. We have an acceptance of the agenda.
I'll move to accept the agenda as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second to accept the agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. At this time, we will accept business from the floor on items that are not on the agenda. If you have something to say, we can't address it at this time. Seeing none, we will begin. Mr. Snellings, would you give us an introduction and overview?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Wilson, members of the Commission. Tim Snellings, Development Services Director. Have with me Dan Breeden, Principal Planner, and Chuck Thistlethwaite, Planning Manager. Also have today to provide a presentation will be Joanna Jansen from Design, Community, and Environment, our lead general plan consultant. I'm not sure if Lisa Katz is going to help do anything, but Lisa's back here from DCNE as well, taking notes. What I'd like to do is to give a little introduction to what we're going to do today, and then I'll turn it over to Joanne and she'll walk us through the particular study areas that we'll be focusing on. But wanted to just set the context, if I could, for today's discussion. And as you can tell, it's not your eyes. We're having a little trouble with our projection system here. So we have another projector coming down that we'll swap out in a few minutes, so we'll need a short break in about 10 or 15 minutes to do that, if that's okay. But for what I'm going to talk about, I think we'll be okay. Just for everybody's awareness, hopefully everybody's aware that we have a website that is comprehensive with all the information that has occurred to date for Butte County General Plan 2030. The website is buttegeneralplan.net. That's available 24/7 for people to review information. All the information from all the meetings, videos, is available on the website, so anybody at any point in time can jump on board, get caught up, and review the past information from the previous meetings that have brought us here to where we are today. The project schedule, this was approved in the original contract with Design, Community, and Environment back in 2006 when the project started. And it outlines really a strategy for how to proceed with creating Butte County General Plan 2030. And as well creating a new zoning ordinance to implement the new general plan. And the key strategy are these workshop series, and there are 8 workshop series identified in these little dotted lines, dashed lines around these 4 bodies. And actually the concept is that each workshop series begins with a public workshop, is followed with Citizens Advisory Committee meetings, is followed by Planning Commission meetings, and then is finalized with the Board of Supervisors. The strategy is for 8 workshops, and you can see towards the end of our process we have a little concern about these 3 workshop series, and we'll talk about that at a future meeting with you, what our strategy is going to be. Essentially, each workshop series is vetted extensively through this public participation process. And it really is intended to provide lots of opportunity for input as the process moves the project forward and into your lap for review and discussion. So, and I'll walk through what has occurred with this particular workshop series. But so far what we've accomplished, workshop series number 1 had to do with issues identification and existing conditions analysis. That was completed in May of 2007. The alternatives development process, Workshop Series 2-3, was completed in November of 2007, and then we started on this development of a preferred alternative, and that's targeted completion date is July 29th or 30th with the Board of Supervisors this year. The goals and policies discussion starts in September of this year, and we hope to conclude that series before the end of the year as well. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, we're trying to keep the task, each task, moving forward. We want to acknowledge that things may need more discussion, and that's okay. But we also do want to keep our eye on the goal here. We also will work on this says general plan elements, but it's the general plan. The draft general plan itself is workshop series number 6, and then a housing element and the zoning will conclude our process. Right now we're in workshop series 4 with the finalization and of the preferred alternative, and your commission will go through today the study areas around Paradise and Orville. And then on the 13th, we'll discuss the Central and North County study areas. Achievements to date, milestones to date, have to do with the City County Summit workbook, a lot of information in that. Guiding principles, which outlines really some, it's really the early policy idea. And we didn't develop comprehensive guiding principles. They were purposely left by the Board of Supervisors to be general, but they wanted to give some sense of policy around these 13 topic areas, which I'll highlight for you in a moment. The briefing book has this overview of the county from a very high level. Key issue summary is a document we produced from Workshop Series 1. The Setting and Trends report has lots of information as well, 19 chapters, 1,000 pages about the existing conditions of Butte County. And then the Alternatives Evaluation Report, which came out in April. Lots of information to assist with this specific discussion right now on the finalization of a preferred alternative. A few other points about those. Here are the guiding principal topics. Cooperative planning with the cities, you can see is top of the list. Not that these are in order of importance. They're all important issues. Water resources is as important as cooperative planning. But these were intended, again, to give a sense of the things that were on the minds of the Citizens Advisory Committee, your Planning Commission, and the Board as we go down the road of preparing a new general plan. And these are helpful, and they do cause opportunity for good discussion. For example, the cooperative planning. When you look at some of the study areas, you might ask the question, well, how is this in the spirit of cooperative planning? We'll see. Here are the chapters in the Setting and Trends report. Again, a wealth of information about each of these topics. There's about 100 pages just on water resources alone. And so a lot of technical, specific, and helpful information for a discussion like this. The Alternatives Evaluation Report, again, it examined each of the alternatives with specific and provided this grading system, which is somewhat subjective, but again, it was intended to provide you with some sort of a comparative measure about these particular topics or constraints as they relate to each of the study areas. And so it's a tool to use to assist in the discussion about your creation of the preferred alternative. We also had, through this date, we've had several special topic workshops. We discussed smart growth concepts back in May 31st. This is with the Citizens Advisory Committee, and these are available on DVD or the video on the website. And so, and the PowerPoints, if there were PowerPoints, are available on the website as well. But the topic of smart growth was discussed fairly extensively. We talked about low-impact development strategies. A professor from Davis gave us some insight about that. Butte County air quality issues. We had air quality executive director attend that and present that information. The concept and topic of fiscalization of land use, which relates to cities and counties relationship on annexing areas and making sure that there's a funding strategy for the provision of services as land annexes from the county to the city, where the county still provides a great deal of services to land in the city, to residents of the cities. And we had a very excellent discussion about that. The topic of climate change, which is a law that we're required to follow with the general plan. We actually will be bringing back in a few months a contract amendment to add to our scope of work to address climate change requirements that our general plan must comply with. But we discussed what the law is and what other counties are doing, some of the lawsuits that have occurred around that with San Bernardino County and other jurisdictions. And that's very important information for us as we will address that topic in our general plan. We discussed water resource issues as well as the Butte Regional Conservation Plan. Lots of important information from those discussions that again will weigh into the discussions not only today and next meeting, but also in the policy discussions that will follow in Workshop Series 5. And then finally, we had a good workshop on sustainability, the topic, defining really what sustainability is, the triangle of environment, economy, social responsibility, equity, and just how that fits together, and to kind of diffuse the fears I think that people have about that, the concept of sustainability, that business and environment, one or the other needs to win, and that's really not the strategy about and what sustainability is all about. Both can win is the idea. Deer herd issues. Actually, we're scheduling a special study session. Hopefully you're aware of that. July 22nd, I believe. July 22nd, and it'll either be at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. That's a joint Planning Commission Board of Supervisors workshop, and that's to receive information on the deer herd study. Again, we have old information. We want to update that. We have done a lot of work studying statistical analysis to generate a new parcel-specific deer herd map, and we want to have that discussion with your commission and board jointly. That's scheduled for July 22nd. Wildfire issues also were discussed at that February 28th meeting. And again, so lots of information has been developed so far through this process. We've also touched last meeting on the population projections for each jurisdiction. That's important information to keep in mind as well, and what we're planning for from a actual population figure. We're planning, the cities and the county jointly are planning for about 100,000 new residents to be added by the year 2030, and that's very important that we take that into account. On the housing unit numbers we're talking about, that equates to about 44,000 dwelling units. And we have about 10,000 of those planned for, or that we need to plan for in the unincorporated part of the county. Chico has about 20,000 units they need to plan for. Also, the last Planning Commission meeting, I wasn't here. We had another meeting. Sorry, I couldn't be here. But Chuck was here, and I think your commission raised several other topics of concern that you feel are relevant for the discussion that you'd like to have us address. Our strategy, our proposal is that we believe each of the items that you brought up will be covered as we get into a specific area that has that topic that's relevant. And for example, the question is asked, well, how do urban reserves factor into the discussion? And what our proposal is that rather than have a presentation on what urban reserves are, is that we address it specifically when we get to an area where urban reserves came up, such as in the Gridley Biggs area, and that concept, so we can specifically talk about it for that study area. It's not a perfect strategy, but with all that's on our plate, with all the information we've been gathering and the meetings we've been holding, that was the best we could offer today. And if that doesn't work, then maybe we can do a separate meeting to address that, would be the idea. So with that, we have today, the issue is study areas, and the study areas around Paradise and Orville. And Joanne is going to walk us through those. The housing projection units, I'm sure we'll talk about both housing and jobs. So I'm going to, with that, I think I'll turn it over to Joanna, and maybe she can start with the introduction, and I'll switch out the projector.
Thank you, Tim.
Could I slide in with a question before we get into this particular study areas? And it has to do with the relationship of these particular study areas with the next meeting series, the policies and analysis. There's a lot of areas in Butte County that are not included in one of these study areas, and at some point they're going to have to be analyzed along the same criteria. So what do we, and the explanation was, well, we'll cover that with the policies. Are these study areas just examples to focus discussions on how we're going to treat the county as a whole, or should we, or these actual decisions we're going to be making with respect to these study areas? So when we make a recommendation, for example, that a particular study area is going to be slated for single-family residential, when we get to the policies section, does it mean that we're going to extrapolate that decision into all areas similarly situated, or are we focusing on just that one particular area?
We're really focusing on these study areas, the intent of identifying these study areas, and part of the reason that your committee and the CAC and the board spent so much time formulating these three alternatives is that we tried to capture the areas where we expect the general plan land use designations need to change. So we're not anticipating significant changes to designations outside of these study areas, and certainly would not plan to, look at what you decide to do in Thermalito and then apply that in a blanket way to other areas that we deem to be in a similar condition.
Okay, then, one of the things I'm going to focus on is comparing the number of dwelling units that we approve in these study areas with what I think we need to develop as a target number. And if you're doing that arithmetic, what do you do with the rest of the county? There is a lot of land out there, and a lot of it's, may be as suitable for development as the study areas. Do we assume all of it's going to be zero housing units? Do we assume it's going to be developed according to the existing general plan? What assumptions do we make about the rest of the county when we're evaluating whether we've satisfied the growth targets?
And the current approach would be that those areas would retain their current general plan designation.
Okay.
So if there are undeveloped parcels, for example, that even an ag area that could accommodate an additional single dwelling unit, then the landowner would still have the right to add that dwelling unit.
Then there's some areas that may well be, well, just on the basis of that, then we need to add to this table some projection about what the number of dwelling units that are going to be added to the housing stock as a result of the rest of the county. And here we've already got twice as many or 3-4 times as many dwelling units as we need. On top of that, we've got whatever the rest of the county is going to build out at over the next 30 years. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's something actually I was recently thinking about as well, that what about the rest of the county? And I think that there's two approaches we could take. One is that we make some assumption that there will be some growth rate out there in the unincorporated parts of the county, the other 50,000 parcels that are out there. There will be some growth rate that will occur there. Is it significant relative to the study areas? Maybe not significant, but it is important that we factor that into some assumption level. And so I think we can work to do that as well.
Second question I have now with respect to the target growth, there's 44,000 units for the county as a whole, and the projection is 10,000 for the unincorporated area. We interact with the cities because there's got to be an assumption that the city is going to meet some of their growth needs by annexing to the county. The question I've got is how much, in figuring out how much we've got to target for the county, how much is the how much of the 44,000 total are the municipal areas, mostly, Paradise, Chico, and Oroville, going to satisfy their 33,000 units out of their own sphere of influence or their own city limits? We don't really have, do we have a number for that?
I think a couple things. One is you'll hear when each of the city planning directors makes a brief presentation to you, you might get a sense of that from those discussions. We've been having those discussions with them as well, and if we don't have that in any specific information, we can provide that information. For example, Chico, they estimate in their existing sphere that they can accommodate about 10 to 11,000 new dwelling units. So they're going to need another 10 to 11,000 from the county. So that as you look at study areas around Chico, there can be some presumption that several of those would be annexed to Chico's city limits. We're a little ahead of Chico with their general plan. They haven't come up with their preferred alternative yet and identified their growth areas. That will happen in September for the city of Chico. So we'll be coordinating with them through workshop series 4 and 5 to coordinate that. With Oroville, it's a little different because they have a preferred alternative already adopted and a general plan actually adopted or ready to adopt. Okay.
Well, I would like to know that before we start making decisions about even these study areas, because if one goal we have is to keep growth next to urban areas, the Commission may not buy that, but I do. We want to figure out, which of those, we need to figure 10,000 of those are going to get annexed to Chico, and some will get annexed to Oroville and Paradise, and then it's the net left over that we've got to use to come up with our 10,000.
Correct. I think you'll see that around Paradise, it's not significant because there's not a lot of growth planned for Paradise. I mean, their general plan hasn't even really started yet. Chico is the most relevant, I think. Oroville has such a different strategy, and we can talk about that maybe when we're talking about Oroville area, about their specific, Oro Bay is part of Oroville's strategy, which is, 3 miles from the city, so from, I guess, the city center, as I would describe it. So it's a different strategy they're taking, and they have the reasons why they're doing what they're doing. It's a good discussion to have, though.
I want to make a couple points about the growth projections for BCAG. One is that they are not necessarily allocated among, it's not entirely clear, the methodology or the detailed methodology of how they're allocated among unincorporated county and the cities. So it's a little bit difficult. We can't really make an exact apples-to-apples comparison. And the CAC asks a lot of the same types of questions that you're asking about how do we know which of these units will be developed in the cities and which will be developed in the county. So we really tried to encourage them to focus on growth in the county overall, rather than in whether it's going to be in the city or in the county. The units are part of the same growth rate or part of the same growth projections. So we tried to ask them to focus on whether or not, where those units should be. Is this an appropriate place for development or not? And the other point that I want to make sure is clear about the projections is that the BCAG projections are based on a 20-30 year horizon, while the table that you have describing the preferred land use alternative presents the full build out of that alternative. And this may or may not happen by the year 2030, but the BCAG projections are arrived at by a mathematical projection of a growth rate over the until 2030, whereas this is saying that to achieve full build out on every parcel under every designation, it doesn't assign a time year horizon to it. So that's another reason why the full build out number for the preferred land use alternative might be a little bit excuse me, a little bit larger than the BCAG number.
Okay. All right.
So what if we decide we want to go with 2? Aren't we basically giving part of our 10,000, aren't we giving a large portion of our 10,000 units to the urban areas and just saying, well, we don't want them in the county, we really would rather they become a part of the urban area?
And I understand your go with 2.
Well, you're throwing all these numbers around, and one of them you just threw out in the unincorporated area was 10,000 people. Well, if we go with alternative 2, we're basically saying that we really don't want those 10,000 people in the unincorporated area. We really want them to eventually go into the urban area, and we want the planning over the next 30 years to be We want the planning to go into an urban context, and then, in other words, we want that growth to go in the urban areas. Now, doesn't that kind of change the figures? Doesn't it change that 10,000 figure to maybe something closer to 5,000 or even less than that?
The
You see
10,000.
where I'm going? I'm saying you're telling us 10,000. I don't know where BCAT came up with 10,000, but maybe we're saying we would like the majority of the growth to go within the incorporated areas where they could get the services that they need and the infrastructure they need.
The 10,000 number is the number of new units above what's existing today that BCAC projects would be built by 2030, and that's in the unincorporated county. But what we don't know is whether that includes units in a place like Thermalito that's in the unincorporated county today but may be annexed by 2030. That's not clear to us. What
Not clear to us.
it's not clear to BCAC.
Okay.
What I was saying is, they're projecting that those 10,000 units would be built, but so those 10,000 units would be existing if the county wanted to pursue a policy of directing growth towards areas close to urbanized areas. Certainly those might be more likely to be annexed, but I guess there's a distinction between the policy decision and a number of new units.
Can I slip in one question? Along the lines of what Rick brought up was part of my question too, but we're doing study areas for new development. Everything outside those areas we assume are staying as they exist.
I wouldn't.
We're counting numbers.
I don't think that's a fair assumption just yet. I mean, because we have some, for example, some zoning designations that I think we want to see changed.
But these study areas and the numbers we're looking at are all in addition to what's already available.
Correct.
In the counties.
Correct.
So
But
it's
that's
all
where,
in addition to.
right. That's where your policies will make the connection, is that, if you have a 1,000-acre ag piece of land and the policies say you can't split ag, and develop on ag land, then that's really not a threat to be developed. So it will connect when the policies, and I realize the perspective that we're backwards here, and we've kind of talked around that one, and we have the process we have, and we'll see it through and with policies next workshop series.
Tim, I would just like to say that prior to this meeting of today, I met with the property owners, some property owners, and/or their representatives that fall within these areas, in particular Area 10, Area 13, and they are under the impression that we're downzoning their properties, and that we're giving the CAC folks the power to call the zoning on their properties. And I just want to know, I want them to know that that's not really what's happening, and that what we're looking at is the general plan amendment as what we're supposed to do, constitutionally. And what I'm trying to say is also the meetings I had were, generated by concerned citizens that we're maybe kind of going about it the wrong way, or giving, the power to make policy to the wrong, parties. And I want everyone to know out here that I am accessible, not just to the property owners, to any citizen. The last thing I want somebody to think of, just because they see me up here in a suit and tie, is that I'm untouchable as a planning commissioner. I'm to listen not just when I'm up here, and I will listen to anyone. And I know we're not, closing these areas yet and making policy right now.
I think that's a good point of clarification for people. The Citizens Advisory Committee was created to provide a representative voice of the county citizens, and to make to bring that perspective with their diversity of perspectives, frankly, their special interests. Each, if we have someone from a particular industry on the committee, well, they kind of represent that industry, and they but I think it's sort of out in the open so that everybody knows the perspectives that people are coming from. And so the Citizens Advisory Committee makes recommendation to the Planning Commission and the board. I expect the Planning Commission will have some recommendations that will be in alignment with the Citizens Advisory Committee and some that will not be in alignment with the Citizens Advisory Committee. So we will take forward your recommendations as well as the Planning Commission or the Citizens Advisory Committee recommendations to the board, the policymakers. The board is going to make the policies. The board is the only one that's going to change zoning on anybody's property. It is not the Planning Commission. It is not the Citizens Advisory Committee. So, and the board greatly appreciates, I know, the work and efforts. The Citizens Advisory Committee spent about 30 hours of meetings on this information. Hopefully, you won't need 30 hours of meetings. Hopefully, we're kind of narrowing down the discussion as we progress up the policy level.
But you need to also clear up, one of those questions was the board may in fact decide to downzone areas.
Yes, the board may.
Make a decision when they go through the plan that certain areas are miszoned, up or down.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's,
The board will make that decision.
I understand that, but, we want to be, as, a government entity here, we'd like to try to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem, like, President Reagan said.
I've got no more questions.
Questions?
Well, we have a time on the agenda this morning, Chair Wilson, for a presentation from the Town of Paradise. If they're here, we'd like to welcome them to the podium so that they can at least speak towards the Citizens Advisory Committee recommendations. There's some information in your large packet about that under the Paradise area. So if Al McGrean or any of the staff members, we would like to ask them to come on up to address the Planning Commission directly about that information. Thanks.
Good morning, Planning Commission. It's a pleasure to be here before you this morning. As your staff members just indicated, you should have information in your packet for today's meeting that reflects, quite frankly, the input being offered to you for your consideration at this stage of the process, coming to you from the Town of Paradise via actually 3 levels of input. It was a combination of input generated by staff and the Paradise Planning Commission, the advisory body of our town council, as well as the town council. Let
me just interrupt and let them know it's on page 155 of your packet. There's a lot of information up there, so it helps to have the page numbers.
Thank you, Dan. What I'd like to do is just walk you through each of the study areas that's on the page that Dan has just referred to.
Dan, can you put maps up so while he's going, make reference to these areas? Because I still haven't memorized all 30 areas. And
You just want the study areas of that
if
vicinity?
He's talking, yeah, it'd be nice if you had Paradise up, so when he's talking about study area number 11 or whatever, that we know
We need that map on
what he's
there.
referring to.
Tim, we have it as part of our presentation.
Right. You could bring up Joanna's presentation.
You know which page, Joanna?
This is the region.
I think that's it.
This is a map of the preferred land use alternative in the Paradise region.
Well, I'm going to make a few assumptions as part of my presentation. One of my assumptions is that all the current members of the County Planning Commission are familiar with the various land use alternatives that your Citizens Committee wrestled with. I believe they were provided a focus of a choice of 3 alternatives for the most part. And my understanding during the process when the Citizen Advisory Committee worked on this, that in some localities, study areas, that they actually came up with a hybrid or alternative 4, as you will, as opposed to the 3 that they had to initially ponder and choose from. But hopefully, I assume that all of the commissioners are familiar with that part of the process. And the reason I bring that up is because, quite frankly, we concentrated on those 3 choices of alternatives as well, and then gave you input accordingly from the town's perspective. The study areas that are most importance and are germane, we feel, to our community are what you see on this map for the most part. Study areas 5, 10, 11, consecutively through 15, and study area 20. I'll take them in chronological order. Study area 5 is referred to as the Magalia Paradise Pines area. That's everything starting contiguous to the northern boundary of the town of Paradise, essentially where the community of Magalia begins, includes all of Magalia, the two reservoir areas, Magalia Reservoir and Paradise Lake, as well as what's known by most of the citizens as the Paradise Pines area. That area, it's no coincidence, the geographic boundaries shown on the study area for the most part reflect the watershed that's germane to Paradise Irrigation District, and it's very important to, it's the main water supply and water purveyor for our community. So obviously, because of that relationship, it's of extreme importance not only to the water supplier and purveyor, but to our community as well in terms of what you anticipate, how you plan future land use and growth and development over the next planning horizon for the county. With that in mind, plus our knowledge of the history of that area, and you probably have learned this in the information that your staff and your Citizens Committee has provided you, there are some constraints that have been identified in that particular study area. Constraints in terms of limited access. Probably if any of you have been up there, you're well aware of the fact there's primarily only one way in and out of the area at certain times of the year. There's some constraints in relation to wildfire hazard, lay of the land, topography, soils. This is an unsewered area, as you're all well aware. Similar to the town of Paradise, I might add. We're probably the largest unsewered community in the western United States. That combined with already existing uses there, what we looked at quite seriously was, and what you have in your packet today is, we felt that Alternative 2 is valid. And Alternative 2, as most of you are well aware of, is concentrated growth, concentrating the growth, planning any growth you do plan to be in already existing urbanized areas in this study or in close proximity there too. That's the input we're providing you, but at the same time we're also asking you, and we realize this is probably a next step in your process, that when you address policy, that you make sure that constraints are given sufficient weight and looked at appropriately, commensurate with this land use alternative, so that it's not adopted as an assumption that the growth will take place unless and until those constraints are properly either avoided or resolved in some manner. And that's the input we're asking you to consider relative to that area. Area number 10, as you can see on the map, I'm going to give you a little caveat here. We were kind of puzzled with how the study area boundary was derived for Area 10. And we're not really asking your staff the basis or the background behind that, but it's kind of puzzling to us in some respects how it was drawn, and particularly a long, elongated portion going down the Skyway as we know it, but only on one side of the Skyway rather on both sides of the Skyway relative to what we feel is the experience when you drive up and down that main corridor up to the ridge, that most people don't think of a study area or a land use area on just one side of the road. But regardless of that fact, what we did is we looked at this very carefully, and from our perspective, we think that there's portions of this study area that are valid, that are eligible, and should be carefully set aside and planned for some growth, particularly in relation to Alternative 2, again, that if you're going to assign any growth to be planned in this study area, that it should be in close proximity, if not abutting the town of Paradise. And as you can see, as part of this area, particularly as you just leave the town limits along the Skyway or Neal Road, you have a substantial land area that's shown in the study area, and we feel that that's a logical area for potential growth, provided, again, that constraints that are known or carefully studied are either avoided or appropriately resolved. Another caveat I should share with you, although we didn't give you this as input as part of your formal process, the town, probably you've heard about this, we have a development application that entails a general plan amendment of our current general plan relative to this immediate land area. Takes in about approximately 70 acres sandwiched in between the two directions of Skyway. The landowner of that particular property is seeking a general plan land use amendment of a current general plan, a pre-zoning of that site, a development agreement with the town, and endorsement of annexation of that acreage into the town limits for future service of a proposed shopping center complex and multi-land use. You may have heard of that. We did not take a position on that at this time as part of your general plan effort, however, but it's something you should be aware of that is ongoing. We got the formal applications filed with the town. However, at this point in time, I should advise you that those applications have been deemed incomplete for processing, and that's the status they've been in for several months at this point in time. So it remains to be seen when...
N10?
Beg your pardon?
This is N10?
In Study Area 10, yes.
Is that the CATS parcel or is this a different
It's
one?
the old CATS project, yes, correct.
It's where the fork where the two...
Yes, sir. Just a caveat, I'm not throwing that out there to influence you, I'm just saying that's a dynamic that's underway that may become a reality during your process here, and hopefully we'll keep in touch with your staff so that you'll be knowledgeable of that where it evolves. Study Area 11 is interesting in its configuration as well. As you can see, it's located immediately west of and contiguous to Clark Road or State Highway 191. Abuts the existing southern town limits of the town of Paradise. Looks like its western boundary is Neal Road, and its southern boundary is a straight east-west direction as the crow flies. I assume that's probably a township line or something to that effect. Study Area 11, historically for many, many years, the substantial majority of that land area has received an urban reserve designation in your current general plan. And probably Nina remembers that. You've been on the commission some time. And I think that came about in the early 80s, if I remember correctly. And the relationship of that designation is a symbiotic relationship between the county and the town, the understanding being that what the county was doing with that designation is assigning policy, as most of you commissioners know, whereby any lands in that particular locality would not be allowed to be divided further down to as small a size as 20 acres. Anything smaller than that would not be allowed unless until such time that that area is carefully addressed by either the town of Paradise through a specific plan of some kind with input received from the county, and then via that specific plan given direction and policy for possible annexations and expansion of services to serve that area to account for smaller lots and possibly different densities, or conversely until such time that via a specific plan that the landowners themselves take the lead and create an appropriate service entity to provide services commensurate with smaller lots and densities, such as a community services district, for instance. Given that situation, we feel it's pertinent to continue that path with your coming general plan, particularly given the fact that the town does intend to eventually coordinate the efforts of creating a specific plan for that area. So our input to you at this point in time for Area 11 is the same as your Citizens Committee, and that is let the town take a more detailed look at this, support the urban reserve designation at this point in time, and give us an opportunity to work cooperatively with the county and your staff to come up with something that might be of more substance and better direct and guide growth if there's going to be growth.
Are you going to be going through a general plan process real
Yes,
soon?
sir. We are going to start our process the beginning of next fiscal year, and we'll probably run a good couple fiscal years at least.
You mentioned specific plan, that's why I asked you that question.
Well, that leads me to my next point on Area 12. Coincidentally, the town is underway with a specific plan process for that particular study area. And the area you see in Area 12, actually, our specific plan boundary takes in all of that Area 12, as well as a significant amount of acreage within the existing town limits contiguous to that, where the only means of access to that area is coming via the town off of Pearson Road and going southerly via some arterial roads known as Edgewood Lane, Sawmill Road, and South Libby Road. And that's all part of that same ridge. I forget the name of the ridge. I want to say Morgan Ridge, but I think it's the next one over.
So an urban reserve, just for definition, is just basically a kind of an unclassified zone that
well,
I'm trying to figure out what exactly, I realize that you don't want to, there's no development that's going to be occurring in that area, and you're sort of reserving it for future development. But the concept is that you don't let it go too rural, and at the same time, you're not ready to develop it either, so you sort of put it on hold indefinitely
that's
while you're going through a planning process.
Right, that's my understanding. What you normally would do, and I'm not to steal your staff's thunder here, but
We were going to have a whole, we were trying to get a
I
whole
see. What you normally
discussion
do
on that
is your
for other-
general plan itself would show a land use designation known as urban reserve, commensurate with that particular area. There would be policies that go with that designation that you would abide by, and you would always remind yourself of that if and when any individual landowner who is not cognizant of that forced your hand and brought you an application for you to consider, you'd say, well, we want to be consistent with these policies. As far as zoning to implement that designation, you have a wide purview of ways you can approach that, but some jurisdictions will actually zone to reflect the minimum parcel size that you want in place to better guide the citizen, you might say, the landowner, until such time that those policies are implemented to a point of providing a specific plan or well-planned way to establish services, for lesser densities, that type of thing. You've got some leeway there how you can approach that. But the key is the designation itself in your general plan. You're telling the world you're setting this aside for future urban planning and urban type land uses, that type of thing.
12 is a reserve too then, right?
Well, what 12 is my understanding and your input from us is that your Citizens Advisory Committee was made aware of the fact that the town is currently doing a specific plan effort that entails that area. And my understanding with your Citizens Advisory Committee, as well as the input from your consultant staff, is they basically opted to the town saying, well, since you're that far along, town, we'd like to see you take the lead, and we'll make that our recommendation to the commission and subsequent to the board. And we support that from the town's position because we started the specific plan process. We have a draft specific plan out now for public review. Your staff's been made privy to that. We are now in the process of preparing an environmental impact report related to that draft specific plan. We hope to have that out and available by late summer for public review. If things go well, we should have a specific plan that we can go to hearing sometime in the fall to deal with. So we're looking forward to that process. If I may, I'd like to go on to the next study area.
Question?
Yes,
Let me
sir.
ask quick, just for ballpark figures, how many dwelling units do you think you would include in that specific plan?
The specific plan area that we're dealing with, again, includes more than Area 12 that you see here. But collectively, we're looking at approximately about a 3,200-acre land area. And out of that 3,200 acres, there's quite a significant amount already built out, which is in the town limits. We're not anticipating much of a change for that. But relative to the acreage that's undeveloped, it's vacant today, ballpark figure, we still have to analyze through the EIR process. We're looking at approximately 800 to 900 dwelling units. Okay?
Thanks.
And the majority of that potentially is being looked at in this study area. But with a rather unique approach. It won't be dispersed and spread densities. It'll probably be clustered and designed in such a way that constraints are avoided and minimized. Conflicts are there too. Moving on to study area 13. This is the area referred to as South Paradise Pence Road, or the Lago Vista site. I'm not sure why it's called Lago Vista so much, but it's near Lago Vista Road, it's my understanding, but it goes immediately south thereof. We looked at this and we came up with, as your input for you to consider, alternative 2. Again, the concept of concentrated growth near or in urban areas, but we are the first to qualify that at the same time saying only commensurate with any constraints, and there are some known significant constraints in this study area that if you haven't made privy to, you need to know about, only if they're properly avoided or resolved. I think you have constraints relative to the issue of water supply, water distribution, deer herd migration, wildfire hazard, that type of thing.
Is that Del Oro area?
That is the old Del Oro area. Well, I should say the old Lime Saddle Community Services District area. You probably remember that, Mr. Nelson. But Del Oro is the main water purveyor today. You're correct. But anyway, that's our input for you to consider there. On area 14, I don't know if that's on the map there, is it?
14 is the little bit there, exactly.
It actually goes further
See all of
down.
it.
It goes off the face of this map. But 14 is referred to as the Nance Canyon Highway 99 study area. In fact, the boundary goes all the way down to Highway
It
99.
does. You can see 15, and it shares the boundary with 99.
The input we're providing you here is that we think it's an interesting, again, delineation of the study area, but there are some land areas in there we feel, from our standpoint, has some potential for development. There's a lot of land area that has a lot of constraints, however, and we think it warrants more study, more than you've even generated up to this point in time with that in mind. So our input to you is that we're pushing primarily alternative 1, and if you remember, alternative 1 is your existing general plan and character today, but yet we're putting a caveat there for you to consider that there is a portion of this area that maybe merits a little more closer detail examination, perhaps, than what you've presently evolved to this point. Area 15 is known as the Hamlin Canyon Highway 99 or Horning property. The main input you're getting from us is primarily alternative 2, and the main reason being is that this has been historically looked at for many, many years. I think at one time there was a concept promoted in Butte County of, if you're going to have a need for urban development and urban growth, that maybe you might want to entertain the concept of a new urban site outside of the existing 5 urban areas in Butte County as they exist today. This was one of the potential areas that was looked at many years ago. And we haven't lost sight of that, and we're just simply suggesting that you maybe give this some thought. If that ends up being part of the mix in your general plan of a possibility of a new urban area, study area 15 may be commensurate for that candidate, for that type of thing. But again, we would qualify that only if constraints that are properly analyzed are avoided and resolved, because we're talking about an area that's right now not contiguous to any urban areas at this point in time. Study area number 20. This is down by the intersection of Clark Road, Highway 191, and Durham-Pence Road, I believe. Our input to you is alternative 1, existing general plan and character for the most part. The biggest question that came up in some of our discussions there is this, given its location down there, down in the valley, in Butte Valley, is this an area of groundwater recharge? And we really don't know ourselves. It's something you may want to just look at and ask your staff and your consultant to help you with in some respects. I'm sure you've had you will hear various degrees of input for that particular location, I believe, for alternative land uses, because it's near Butte College. There's a lot of commute patterns, as you all know, coming from different directions there, so on and so forth.
Did Butte College enter your discussions at all when you were talking about it?
I don't recall our council or our planning commission mentioning much about Butte College, but they're well aware of the fact that it's in close proximity there to that study area, correct? And that's pretty much, I just walked you through it very, very rudimentary. If you have any questions of me, I'll attempt to answer them, commissioners.
Is the town planning on annexing the upper Magalia area at any point in time? Do you
No, not to my knowledge. No.
What about Area 13, the Lago Vista area? That's
Again, Area 13, as it currently is depicted and delineated, is, as you can see, not contiguous to the town limits. There's a gap there's interspersing lands in between, and most of you know, well, annexations do not occur on detached areas like that. They have to be contiguous. And to my knowledge, that we have not heard any interest from landowners immediately north of that study area to be annexed and served by the town. That's the country club area, that's in the town limits, but immediately south of the country club area, as you go down Pence Road, you'll see a small smattering of some commercial development, a mobile home park, I believe, and a church. It's those property owners there. Unless they have a genuine interest in being annexed and served, sir, I don't think we're going to see Area 13 possibly being annexed. But again, that's current situation, and I'm voicing historical viewpoints, you might say. Looking long-term, who knows? If you plan and try to promote some semblance of an urban-type development concentrated maybe, in this study area, but closer to Paradise, maybe over the long run, that might, the viewpoint of the landowners may change, may evolve, I don't know. But good question. Any other questions, Commissioners? Well, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's break time, isn't it?
Yeah, and then we'll open the public.
Yeah,
Right.
run it together. So we're going to take a 15-minute break.